I created this video because I had people emailing me, leaving comments on the YouTube channel asking specifically for this. I've bought a property. Now what's next? Can you break it down for me, Luke? The first thing you need to do is celebrate. Go have a nice dinner with your partner and with your family and celebrate. Now you've done that, it's time to get stuck into the numbers, plan for the next steps. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you an investment property calculator where you can run all of the expenses on an annual profit and loss. You can plan for the future and you can make sure you're not missing anything when it comes to making this property purchase. So if you head over to purposeproperty.com.au, you can download a copy of this free investment property calculator. You can run your own numbers when it comes to doing some deal analysis. So you can look at the purchase costs, you can look at your funding, your deposit, and you can look at the annual profit and loss, which is what we're going to focus on today. As you can see here in this example property, we've got 1 Smith Street on 700 square meters. There's $250,000 of land value and it's a 3-bed, 1-bath, 2-car property. It's not flood prone and it does have granny flat potential. I've actually shot videos on this investment property calculator previously, but in today's video, we're going to be focusing on what you should do next when it comes to an investment property. These are some example numbers for deal purchase analysis. So if you bought the property for $500K, what the stamp duty would be, some estimated solicitor's fees, some pre-purchase inspections, and then obviously the finance involved in managing and buying that property. But this is the section we're really interested in for today. So what happens when you're looking to buy a property and you want to run the numbers on that deal? So what comes next? The first thing you're going to need to do is make sure you lease that property out. So if you've bought an investment asset, you need to reach out to a property manager or multiple property managers, assess them for what they're going to cost you, and then appoint them as property manager for that property. Now you can legally self-manage your properties, but it's easier to hand it over to a professional to manage your asset for you, handle the repairs and maintenance, collect the rental income, and essentially make your property investment more passive. So let's just say in this example, you bought a property and it's going to rent for $500 per week. You'll punch in $500 and we're going to say that the property is rented for 50 out of 52 weeks. You could say it's rented for 48, which would be a 92% occupancy rate. You could say it was rented for 52 weeks, which would be a 100% occupancy rate. But for me and for my portfolio, I like using a 50 weeks of the year. So it's vacant 2 weeks every year. Now, for most people in a inner city suburb or in a metro location, we've got sub 1% vacancy rates at the moment. We're seeing rents creep up and up. And so there's no vacancies essentially at this point in time, except for handover periods, which is why I've put 2 weeks in. You can be more conservative than this, you can be more bullish than this, but I just like using 50 weeks as an example. So in this scenario, you would be receiving $25,000 gross income if this property rented for $500 per week. So you're sorted on the income side. And that equates to a 5% gross yield on the purchase price. So that's great. So what's involved next in terms of the expenses and handing over to the property manager? Now you need to advertise. So you've got a budget of $100 here. Sometimes the property managers will throw that in for free. Sometimes they're going to charge you more for advertising and renting out the property. It does depend on the property manager and the deal you negotiate. I've seen fees as low as 5% for property management, as high as 12% for property management on the high end, and a weekly leasing fee to lease the property out. So there's a whole range of fees that might be involved, but it comes down to you negotiating with a property management team to come up with the right price for you. For example, a standard ballpark price could be in the middle ground of that, say around 7 to 8% in terms of management fees. And then you might expect a advertising fee or a leasing fee of 1 week's worth of rent. And so let's put in 1 week's worth of rent as our expected advertising and leasing fees. One of the other things to touch on at the very start of purchasing a property or signing a contract is you need to go out and get insurance. Now, insurance premiums have gone up in recent times, but for me, if you're looking to save as much money as possible, I shop around for insurance and I typically go for an annual premium with a very high excess. What this means is Emily and I really never plan on making a claim unless it's for major damage, unless we have a hailstorm and the roof needs to be completely replaced, or there's a fire at the property. And so we might have a $5,000 excess in our own portfolio, but that minimizes what we need to pay each year in terms of premiums. Everyone's different, but that's how Emily and I do it to save as much money as possible on our insurance. One of the other things you need to factor into your annual profit and loss is council rates. Now this varies council to council. Brisbane City Council costs about $600 to $650 a quarter at this point in time. So we're going to punch in 650 by 4. And so for about $2,600 a year, you're going to be paying your council rates. You own the property and therefore you need to pay the council rates. Whether it's your own home or an investment, everyone pays rates to the council. That's for your bins, for the maintenance of parklands, for the sewer and water and all those types of things covered by council. Now, the biggest expense in anyone's property portfolio is interest. Interest is typically the largest expense because people typically use 50 to 80% of debt when purchasing a property. And so in this example, if we have an interest rate of 5.5% and the loan was for $400,000, the interest on the loans would be $22,000 each year. Now that's just the interest component. If you're paying principal and interest, your cash flow is going to be affected even more. So this is just a profit and loss, not a cash flow. And so if you were doing cash flow numbers, you might need to add, say, an extra $8,000 for paying down the principal each year. Now, some other placeholders in here that you might need to think about depending on your situation. A body corporate, some cleaning fees if you need the property cleaned before you rent it out. You might need to look at having gardening or lawn maintenance. Emily and I had that on our unit block. We pay about $110 a mow. There's a lot more mowing in around the Christmas and New Year's period with summer, and it's a bit quieter in winter. And so you need to take that into account if you're going to manage the maintenance on the property in terms of the lawns and the yard. You might need to think about land tax. Now, there are ways to plan and manage your land tax, and I've done videos on that in the past. But depending on your situation and the structures that you're using, you might need to look at budgeting for some land tax expenses. Now, the next one is legal expenses. These are expenses associated with managing the property from a profit and loss point of view. When it comes to purchasing a property, we've already budgeted for solicitor's fees at $1,200. So this is a placeholder for any other legal expenses. You might get a pest treatment or a termite barrier. So you could put in $1,000 there for, say, a couple of spot treatments on termites. We've then got a budget of $1,000 for repairs and maintenance. Now, some people will say this budget's far too low. Some people will say it's too high. It just depends on the property. You might want to budget $5,000 a year. You might want to budget $2,000 a year. You might want to budget $500 a year. It's up to you. I think a reasonable budget comes down to what you think is realistically going to be spent on the property in the next year or two. For Emily and I, we set a budget each year. So it might be $2,000 per property each year, or it could be larger than that if they're properties that we know have deferred maintenance. So you need to weigh it up on an individual property by property basis when it comes to budgeting for repairs and maintenance. The other couple of items we have on this list are water charges, travel expenses, sundry rental expenses. Anything else you want to put in there, you can add in there yourself. Now, water charges, you can typically on-charge to the tenant. And so you can organize that with your property manager. For pretty much all of these expenses, bar the interest on your loans and maybe your insurance, which I would personally want to manage, you can have your property manager pay these expenses for you. Your property manager can pay the council rates, they can pay the repairs and maintenance, the gardening, the lawn mowing. They can really organize all of that for you. This is going to make your property investment far more passive and allow you to go to the beach, enjoy your holidays, and just look at the statements each month to assess how your property is going. So as you can see with these example numbers, you'd be bringing in $500 a week with $608 a week in outgoing expenses, costing you $108 a week to hold this property. So for $100 a week, you're holding this investment asset, and so around $5,200 negative each year. You could also negatively gear this property, so you can look at the interest and potentially claim all these expenses and offset that against your day job income. So that's something to chat with your tax accountant about. So that's been an annual breakdown of a profit and loss, looking at the income, looking at the expenses for an annual profit and loss when it comes to holding an investment property. Like I said at the start, it's really important to celebrate these wins. Buying an asset, whether it's $300, $500, $1 million plus, buying any asset and taking action to invest in yourself and invest in your future, it's important to celebrate that with yourself, with your partner, with your family and friends, because it is a big decision every asset and purchase you make. Now, it might seem that when you look at other people online and you look at YouTubers who have a $5 million portfolio, 50 properties, that it's easy and they're always making these purchases. But it is over a longer period of time. Emma and I built our property portfolio over years, and we follow these steps. We do it in our business in Purpose Property. We've done it in our own portfolio. And so we know the chronological order of how and when to do things. And so I hope breaking down the investment profit and loss here, both on the income and expenses side, has given you a really good idea of what a checklist might be to actually tick off and make sure you're not missing anything. So I hope you got value out of this video. There's so much to talk about when it comes to investment properties, but I hope you got value. Leave a comment down below, drop a like, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and head over to purposeproperty.com.au if you're looking for a Brisbane-based buyer's agent. If you want to see more videos from myself, then click this video over here. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.